Hello and welcome to a Merlins Brick News special where we talk about the new Cobi Catalogue for 2023. The first one actually, number one. Usually they release around 2 per year, similar to what Lego is doing. However, I think we had 3 actually last year. But anyhow, it is here now finally, the new catalogue. We have a couple of new and interesting sets in there. I mean, many of them I already covered in my regular news show that I release every week. However, there's also sets in there that I haven't talked about before. Plus, of course, it is always interesting to also know which sets will go end of life or are actually not part of the catalog anymore, which technically does not mean that you cannot buy them anymore, but obviously it gets a lot harder over time. So let's get started right away. This thing has, I think, 36 pages overall. That's a few more than the last catalog. I'm not sure if we have actually more sets. I haven't counted them, but I guess the overall layout just consumed a bit more space. But let's get started. And the first thing we should take a look at, that was a bit too fast, by the way, for those of you listening to the show during the podcast. I will usually tell you in between on which page I currently am, so you can access the catalog directly and follow along. By the way, down below, that is both true for the podcast show notes as well as for the YouTube description. You can find both the links to setdb.org for all the sets I'm talking about, including the ones that are not on the market anymore or not in the catalog anymore, I should rather say. But also there's a link to the Cobi website for you to access the catalog directly. Anyhow, let's get started. We are on page number 2. So this is Company of Heroes 3 license sets. Not many news up here. We actually think in the last catalog, Company of Heroes was more in the middle. Now it has been pushed up into the front. So I guess Cobi is now serious about this. In general, page 2, as I said, not any news. I think the most interesting ones are still the 3042, the US Air Support Center, and the 3043, the German fighting position, the bunker, because they are buildings and Cobi is not doing many of those. And I think in the military series, there are almost none. So I think if you're interested in Second World War kind of buildings, then this is the best shot from Cobi. If you're moving on to page 3, there we have actually a couple of news. So the Churchill is still there, the 8.8 centimeter flak is still there, which by the way is German for Flugabwehrkanone, so anti-air gun. And then you have the M3A1, the Stuart Tank 3048. That is still the same. However, what is new is the 3049, that is the German Armored Troop Transport SDKFZ 251. If you're wondering, that is Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251 in Aus D, that is Ausführung D, so variant D, so to say, to translate this directly. It's a 1:35 scale vehicle from Cobi, 357 pieces, 1 minifigure, and it's going to be released in March. This is actually, I think, one of the most produced armored transports that were done by the German or in service by the German army during the Nazi era. I think more than 15,000 of these have been produced, so it was quite common actually. What has also been relatively common, I do think, however, I don't have numbers, is the Marder 3. So that is obviously a tank destroyer. We are talking about the 3050 from Cobi's 326 pieces, also scale 1:35, like all the Company of Heroes models. You could also say that is the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 139. Basically, that is a Czechoslovakian tank 38, and it has on top an anti-tank gun that could be the modified ex-Soviet 36.2mm F-22, or it could be, and I guess that is the more common case, the German 7.5 centimeter PAK which is German for Panzerabwehrkanone 40. All right, so here we go. Both of those are going to be available in March. At least that is Cobi's current plan. So let's move on to page number 4 now. Oops, that was a mistake. Page number 4, that is Great War, so World War I. And I think from Cobi's side, there's no real difference here. More or less, I mean, you still have the Sturmpanzerwagen, Vickers is here, Mark V is here, Renault FT is here, also in the museum version still. So yeah, basically no real change. And then we are moving on to page number 5. And here we actually have a lot less infantry. I think nothing has been added, but a couple of infantry packs have been removed. Most and foremost, the 2036, the British Special Air Service unit, and the 2039, the German Elite Infantry. We are also, they also removed the 2257 ambulance, the 2252 Pack Panzerabwehrkanone 40, and also if we move on to the next page, because there's actually nothing has been added on page 5, and if we even move on to page 6, going deeper in the vehicles, the 2272 Field Kitchen in the Executive Edition has been removed, as well as the 2274 German Flak in the Executive Edition. Again, Flak, Flugabwehrkanone, anti-aircraft gun. And there is nothing new. I mean, of course, we still have the Cromwell that was recently released. You still have Sonderkraftfahrzeug 10, so the 2273 is still there. I mean, and of course also both Citroëns, the Traction 11 with Charles de Gaulle, so both the Executive Edition as well as the regular edition. Executive editions usually go out of market first. In fact, a lot of Executive Editions have been removed from this catalog, but the Citroën you can still get. So, and then we are moving on to page 7, and here finally we have a couple of new vehicles. So first, the 2279, the HMC M8 Scott, with 525 pieces, one minifigure. And this, of course, is a 75mm howitzer on a motor carriage. It is based on the M5 Stuart tank, and it has the M116 howitzer in an M7 mount. One vehicle, I mean, these motorized howitzers are just so funny to look at, because it's so short, and it has this enormous howitzer on top. Yeah, self-propelled howitzer. Here we go. And then you have, and I'm pretty sure I will pronounce this entirely wrong, the 2280, the BM13 Katyusha, I guess. So the Soviet rocket launcher. By the way, all of this stuff I'm right now talking about is scale 1/35. This one here has 440 pieces. The description here says one minifigure. However, on the picture you can see two. You see a Soviet soldier and a Soviet officer. So I guess the picture is correct. I mean, why would they put a minifigure in there that is not part of the set? I'm not 1% sure. Anyhow, you have here the rocket launcher. Obviously, these have been used by the Soviet army at scale as in basically an artillery piece. I guess the idea was to have as many of these. They were very cheap to make, highly mobile, especially compared to traditional artillery. So I guess the idea was to have a lot of these, put them in a spot, launch all the rockets, and then get the hell out of there until the Germans came back with their more precise artillery. So the idea was, I think here, to have like massive strikes, not very accurate, but cheap to make, and lots of them. Anyhow, another set that I think already covered in the regular news show is the 2281 Sonderkraftfahrzeug 9. In a field repair version, I would call it, including like a crane, and then there is an engine, I guess a tank engine or something like that, is on the hook right now. We are talking about a set with 498 pieces and one minifigure. A quite weird looking face. If I look at it, it looks almost like a skeleton, but I think the idea here is to have a dude that is a bit dirty from repairing the engine. What is also new, and this is a set I have definitely not talked about, is again a Marder 3, so again an anti-tank or a tank destroyer, and I think it's more or less the same thing as we had before in the Company of Heroes chapter, however, or a series. This is like a desert war version from Rommel's Desert War, I guess. We are talking about the 2282. It has 367 pieces, one minifigure. Like I said, it's basically a question of color. If you prefer this one or the Company of Heroes version. By the way, all the sets I talked about on this page 7 are going to be released in January. However, as always, that usually means over here in Europe, I guess it will take a bit more time before you can buy it across the pond or wherever you are. But these are the release dates from Cobi in Poland. Let's move on. Page 8, nothing has changed here. I think all of these are very well known. I think what a lot of people are very happy about will be that the 2540, the Panzer 6 Königstiger is still there. I think that's a very popular model. Actually, I've seen one of those in action as well. It's very well done by Cobi. None of the others on this page I have ever seen up close. But anyhow, they are all still here. All right, let's move on to page 9. I think the anti-air tank has gone. There I was a bit surprised. So we're talking the 2548, the Wirbelwind, German anti-air tank. Not really sure why, because I think this thing has been released last year. Maybe it wasn't very popular, or maybe they just didn't make enough. Let's see. I'm curious if this thing will actually leave market or go end of life, or maybe they just forgot to put it in the catalog. Anyhow, next to that, I mean, you still have Karlgerät, you still have Panzermaus, so there's still a lot of very interesting sets on this page. Page 10, same story, more or less, all the same. Panther Pudel is still there. I still have this thing over here in one of my closets. Really want to build this one. Amazing sets. Great story, by the way. If you haven't done your research on this one, I recommend to Google it. Panther Pudel. It's a great story. And however, at the end of the day, the 2568 is just a different version of the same set, the 2566, which is the German Panther version, but here it is the Pudel Special. Anyhow, let's move on. We are now on page 11. So these are the 1x48 scale tanks. And here we have no addition, just one removal. The 2703, the T-34 Soviet tank has been removed. However, there is with the 2716, there is still the another T-34. So Soviet army is still covered very well. I mean, in a nutshell, you have them all, right? You have Shermans, actually 2 Shermans. You have German tanks like Panzer III. Panzer III, that's a weird mix, Panzer III, whatever. You have number 5, right? The Panther, you have the Tiger, and they're all here. So I think that is fine. And then let's move on to page 11. No, we just talked about this one. Let's move on to page 12. So these are all the World War II aircraft. No change here. I mean, you still have the Memphis Belle, you have the Messerschmitt 110, the Junkers, they're all here, the Mustang. You have on page 13 still the Vickers Wellington, amazing set, enormous. I mean, this thing goes like, I mean, it's 53 by 71 centimeters, an enormous thing. The P-38 Lightning is still there. The Zero Zen, Hawk, Hurricane, Messerschmitt 109. So all the World War II aircraft magic is still there. And of course, the new thing, the Mosquito, the 5735 that was launched in December. However, nothing has been added. So no new fodder for you aircraft enthusiasts. All right, let's move on to ships in World War II. I guess big news for many folks is that the Enterprise is still in the catalog. I think this is like really the old timer now of the ship lineup. The Petrol boat is still there, the 4825. Enterprise, by the way, was 4815. But also folks that are interested in, let's say, more exotic ships, the aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin, that was actually never put into service. The German Navy to this day never had an aircraft carrier, and that is also true for the Nazi era. But they had plans to build one, and actually they almost I mean, I guess it was like 70% done, the Graf Zeppelin, and of course, so this model never really, I mean, it was, I think, also in World of Warships, and I guess this is how Cobi came to it, but actually this thing was never put into service. The Germans never managed to do that. Anyhow, 4826 still available from Cobi. HMS Hood, not really a very beloved ship due to all the colorful pieces in the inside. It looked almost like a Lego set. Anyhow, all the 2022 highlights are still available. So you still have the Yamato, still the Gneisenau, Iowa class battleship, including the executive edition, so the 4-in-1, where you can, I don't know, make the Missouri out of it, Arizona, etc. Is still available, but also the standard edition, and of course battleship Tirpitz in both versions, 4838 for the executive edition. That includes the machines in the inside, and you have still the 4839, the Tirpitz in the regular edition. However, now we come to the big news, and I think I've talked about this one briefly in the regular news show. We also have a Bismarck, and there are couple of interesting points here. So Bismarck obviously is a sister of the Tirpitz, or it's more the other way around, I should rather say. So battleship Tirpitz is Bismarck class battleship, and so they are very similar, and obviously it makes a ton of sense for Cobi to do both. And they have done this, I think, in the most straightforward line, and you can see this on the number. That is the Tirpitz is 4838 and 4839, and Bismarck is directly following along, 4840. However, the Pennsylvania that is already released is 4842. Long story short, they planned it like this from the beginning. They were designed like 3 ships or 3 sets or 3 products, whatever you may call it. And it makes sense, right? The Bismarck is very similar to the Tirpitz. So obviously the bridge is slightly different, radar, etc. And also, of course, you have different coloring on the armament. So let's see. I'm definitely going to build it. The only thing that I also found a bit curious is that it's 5 millimeters less in length, but it's technically exactly the same ship. It should be all the same, so I have no idea why they came to these different numbers. Different height makes sense because it has different antennas and different masts, etc. But at the end of the day, I guess if you own the Tirpitz, then the Bismarck may not be that interesting to you. Plus, it has a more traditional coloring. I guess that's the main difference, right, between Tirpitz and Bismarck, between these two models. I mean, the ships, of course, had more differences. That this Tirpitz that is currently on the market has more color scheme that comes from the time when the Tirpitz was hidden in Norway, while the Bismarck has the more traditional color scheme. Anyhow, we will get a Bismarck executive edition. My guess is it will stay that way, that you only get this executive edition. Of course, that means it has also a minifigure included. Looks like an Admiral, let's see. And however, I guess they will not make also a standard edition. Why would they? I mean, I guess 3 is enough. Basically, out of the same model, 3 different products. That's already quite nice. Then we have the Pennsylvania, of course. The recent release, the same way. In Pennsylvania, you have 2 models again, executive edition with a 2-in-1, and then you have the Arizona as the standard edition out of that product. And then you have also the latest release, the HMS Belfast, which I haven't built. All the others from 2022 I have, but not the Belfast. But that one, of course, is still available. Long story short, no real news on the ship side. However, I mean, Cobi was like, I mean, they released like crazy last year, right? They were all over the place. I mean, if you think about it, right, we got last year the Yamato, the Gneisenau, the Iowa, we got the Tirpitz and the Pennsylvania. And so I guess it's okay if Cobi is cooling down a little bit. Bismarck I would not really count because it's just a variant of the Tirpitz. Anyhow, that was that for ships. I think, yeah, that was really not, I mean, quite interesting stuff, but not much to talk about really. Page 19, we are now, Vietnam War. Actually, no news here. More or less the same, but of course, a lot of people will be happy that the Huey is still there, the MiG-17 is still there, the Petroboat, all the cool stuff. And then we move on to Cold War. I mean, in a nutshell, Cobi has done, I think, last year like 6, basically airplanes that are all the same, like MiG-17s, and you can buy them as a Lim 1, as a Lim 5, as an S-102, so you have all the different variants, right? You can get Soviet one, Polish, Czechish, Eastern German, so they're all here, but at the end of the day, it's still the same airplane, MiG-15, same thing, so I think it's even 7 of them. Anyhow, let's move on to page 21. Here, there is an interesting saying, and I don't really know the details. I'm not fully understanding it. On the pictures, they look almost the same, but in a nutshell, the 2415 was removed, and instead we have a 2417. Both of them are Corsairs, but the 2417 has, I think, 200 more additional pieces at scale 1/32. Not really sure if I understood what the difference is. Maybe those of you who have built the 2415 can explain this to me. Maybe it was also a mistake in the catalog. Again, not 1% sure. Anyhow, you still have a Corsair in the Cobi lineup. So we are now on page 22. However, no news here. We are talking about now armed forces, 1/35 scale main battle tanks on this page. So you have still the 2 Leopards, you have the Merkava, and you have, of course, the Abrams that was recently released in 2 different color schemes end of last year. So you have still like the Desert Storm or Desert Print variant, not 100% sure of how that is called. And then let's say the traditional wood color scheme, where you even have a variant where you can run it as part of like with Polish colors. The Mirage is still there in Cold War, and if we move on now to page 23, again I cannot see a difference. You still have your F-16s, you have the 1/48 scale F-18 Hornet. By the way, that's an interesting one. Did I? No, I think I have this. Yeah. So, and then you have the F-15, the Chinook is still there, the Apache attack helicopter is still there. So no big change here. Same on the next page. We are now at page 24, no big changes. Black Hawk still available, Zap, MiG-29. Of course, what I should have mentioned, I'm not even sure if it was in the last catalog, but the special Ukraine variant, Ghost of Kiev, MiG-29, that one is not available anymore. But I'm not sure if it was in the last catalog, because it was always kind of a special thing. Anyhow, Polish MiG-29 Fulcrum is still available. Same is true for all the F-35s. We are now on page 25. All the 4 variants, obviously, they have been very recently released. And now comes, I think, for all the airplane enthusiasts, the big news. And that is that we have, and I talked about it briefly in the news show this week, we have now an Osprey. We are talking about the 5835. And I think the interesting thing here is that they call this one the First Flight Edition. I guess it's just a different name for the Executive Edition. Maybe this becomes a new thing. To my knowledge, they haven't done that before. So I think it's a new term, First Flight Edition. But please correct me and put it in the comments if I'm mistaken here. But I do think they have never done this. It feels a bit like an Executive Edition. It has a few more pieces. However, that could also just be a result of the different color scheme. And it's releasing 1 month earlier, which is typical for Cobi doing that with the executive editions. So they call this now the First Flight Edition. Maybe that's a new thing, that airplanes now also get kind of an executive edition as a scheme, which I think is not very common. They have done this usually more with ships especially, and a couple of tanks. Anyhow, 5835, that is the Bell Boeing V-22 Osprey in the First Flight Edition, so it is white and red. It has 2 minifigures included, pilot and co-pilot, I guess. And like I said, 1,136 pieces is going to be available in February. Osprey, of course, a very interesting airplane. Like I said, I talked about in the news show, so not much to repeat here. And then we have the regular edition 5836, a few less pieces, only 1 minifigure included, only a pilot. And it is in like more traditional Navy gray, I would say, or Air Force gray. Here we go to the one that I actually find a bit more interesting, and that is the Warthog, the A-10 Thunderbolt. We are talking about the set 5837, 633 pieces. Of course, also scale 1/48. In service since 1977, so actually first flight was 19 72, so that is 50 years ago. I think, I don't know, does the US Air Force have any airplane that has been in service for that long? What about the B-52? I guess that's a bit longer. But anyhow, it's ridiculous how long this thing has been in service. I think originally they made more than 700. I think somewhere around 300 are still in service. My understanding is they have been modernized to run in service until 2040. And as far as I know, they have no plans for a successor, because I guess the succeeding unit for this unit will be rather drones or something like that. It is close air support attack aircraft. I think it had its biggest successes during the first Desert Storm, destroyed more than 1,000 tanks, 2,000 military vehicles, and 1,200 artillery pieces. Quite a track record, has been part of many combats in the last decades. I think there was the Army tried, or the Air Force tried to get rid of them a few times, but Congress was against it. And like I said, now they are keeping them until 2040. All right, that was that. Now let's go. And here we have the Super Hornet. So I'm just thinking, because I saw the 5804. Let me just briefly go back. No, that's the 5810. So anyhow, what is gone, we are now on page 26, is the 5804. I think that was also an F-18 Super Hornet, but we still have the 5805. The P-51 Mustang is still there. The F-14 is still there. So from that point of view, that is of course the Top Gun variant with the new movie and everything, with Goose and Maverick. So no big changes here. However, where we do have a couple of changes, if we go on to page 27, I think those I have covered in the regular news show. Both in January, we will get 2 additional Boeing machines. Actually, the entire chapter in the catalog was called Concorde before, and now it's called Boeing, because obviously they have the majority in here right now, with first the 26603, the Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, 836 pieces. It is 51 by 55 centimeters, so that is quite an airplane. It's kind of crazy that they managed to do this with this small amount of pieces, but obviously they have a lot of very big pieces. If you look in the front, right, or the main hull, there's a lot of very large pieces in there. And then they have the smaller model, the 26608, the Boeing 7378, with only 340 pieces. However, it is also 36 by 31, or roughly 32 centimeters. Both of them are scale 1 by 110, so they are accurate to each other, so you can for sure buy them together. Personally, I mean, these are like they have the Boeing coloring, like the machines that Boeing is running themselves, like prototypes and stuff. Obviously, it would be great if they could offer for a couple of very well-known airlines an airline variant. I think a lot of people would love that. Anyhow, next to that, we still have the Concorde, the 1917, also I think with Cobi like forever, and of course the Space Shuttle Atlantis, the 1930. I think that one released last year, wasn't it, if I recall correctly? Both in relatively similar scale, so Concorde is 1 by 95 and the Atlantis is 1 by 100. All right, with that, we are moving on to page 28 to Skoda. Yeah, from the small Skoda cars, they removed the 24573 and the 24579, and as a replacement, they added those 2 fellas here. 24584, the Skoda Kodiaq VRS, I guess it's called, scale 1 by 35, to be released in January, 105 pieces. And then the other one is the Skoda Karoq, I guess, 24585, 98 pieces. Also a car for January. Both of them, of course, scale 1 by 35, like all these small Skoda cars. I guess the Abarth is also still interesting. So the Racing Garage, also again, one of the very few buildings that Cobi is doing. They still have this one in the catalog, the 24501. And with that, we're moving on to Maserati. We are now on page 29, and actually no change here. Same cars, same story. Still the Maserati Gran Turismo GT3 racing package, the 24567, definitely a highlight. I mean, it's not really a building, but it gets close. And then we have the Youngtimer collection, this strange collection that Cobi has with like a lot of cars like from the Cold War era, I must say, older cars, especially, of course, many from Eastern Europe. And there we have on page 31, only one edition, the 24589, the FSO Polonaise, which is like, in German it's Polonaise, it's like a dance. Quite interesting. That is actually a motor vehicle that was developed in Poland in collaboration with Fiat during the 70s. So I think it has been produced between 1978 and 2002. That's almost everything I know about the car. This one here from Cobi has 106 pieces. Of course, it is a 1/35 scale car. And yeah, here we go. And then we are moving on to a car scale 1/12, and here I think this is the first catalog in quite a while without a real new thing. So I'm curious. I'm wondering if Cobi has decided to not continue this pursuit. I mean, they have one. When have they started it? The Trabant 601, was that 2022 or 2021? I think it was 2021, including the Opel Rekord Schwarze Witwe. And then, of course, they started the year 2022 with the Maserati M20, which is to this day, actually, I'm not a petrolhead, but this is my most beloved Cobi model. I think it was just, from a brick perspective, it was outstanding in every way. Prints amazing, color amazing, build experience amazing, look and feel amazing, part quality. I was blown away by this set, I must say. Still my all-time Cobi favorite to this day. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the ships as well, but this Maserati M20 was a real masterpiece by Cobi. And the white, the color of the white. White is not a color technically, right? But anyhow, if you look at this, the white is so brilliant. It makes your regular like Lego kind of white looking like a dirty yellow. It's amazing. Anyhow, they are still all here, including their executive edition. So they never did limited editions, only executive. But executive, I think they did for everyone, and they are all still available. So, which is also an interesting sign. And we are now on page 34. Nothing has changed here in that regard. The last one was the Skoda Octavia 4, which I think is the most strange one. No, the Opel Rekord I think came after that. And yeah, here we go. They are all the same. Same is true for the Titanics. Can you say Titanics? I don't know. Both the 1/450 scale Titanics, or the 1928, 1929. I was wondering which is longer in production by Cobi, the Titanics or the Enterprise. I'm not really sure. Anyhow, you can still buy both of them. And that was that. That was the Cobi catalog for 2023. Like I said, 4 additional pages. However, I mean, I haven't counted, but it doesn't feel like they have more sets in there. In general, if you have ever seen a Cobi catalog, the way it's bound out of paper, they always have to go in steps by 4 pages. So they basically added 1 sheet of paper to their catalog, and that makes 4 pages. And you can see that if you compare it to the catalog before. I guess they needed room for maybe 1 or 2 additional sets, but what they opened up the catalog a little bit. Usually you had a few, like 1 set less per page, and in some areas that's basically what they did. Anyhow, here we go. That was the Cobi catalog for 2023. I hope you liked the show. For those of you who watch this on YouTube, please leave a like or a comment, or even better, subscribe to the channel. For you podcast listeners, please leave a review, comment or like on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the show. Thanks for listening. See you next week.